Edward Prendick drifted aimlessly on the vast, unforgiving ocean. He clung desperately to life in a small dinghy, the sole survivor of the ill-fated Lady Vane. The relentless sun bore down on him, turning the wooden planks of his makeshift raft into a scorching bed. His skin, once pale and smooth, now blistered and peeled, a patchwork of angry reds and sickly whites. Each breath was a struggle, his throat as dry and rough as sandpaper. He licked his cracked lips, tasting blood and salt, a bitter reminder of his dire situation. Time lost all meaning as Prendick drifted in and out of consciousness. The horizon blurred, a shimmering line between endless blue sky and bottomless ocean. In his delirium, he imagined rescue ships on the horizon, only for them to dissolve into mocking mirages. Just as his grip on reality began to slip away entirely, a shadow fell across his face. Prendick's eyes, crusted with salt, struggled to focus. A hulking silhouette loomed above him, blotting out the merciless sun. For a moment, he thought death had finally come to claim him. But no, it was a ship. The Ipecacuanha had appeared like an answered prayer, its weathered hull a more welcome sight than any luxury liner. Rough hands seized him, hauling him aboard with little ceremony. The sudden movement sent waves of nausea through Prendick's weakened body. As his senses slowly returned, Prendick became aware of a cacophony of animal sounds. Cages lined the deck, filled with creatures both familiar and utterly alien. The air was thick with the stench of fear and something else. Something that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. A man approached, his face lined with years at sea but his eyes kind. Montgomery, he introduced himself, pressing a canteen of blessed water to Prendick's parched lips. As life slowly returned to his body, Prendick's awareness sharpened. He noticed the furtive glances of the sailors, the way they moved as if danger lurked in every shadow. Montgomery's gentle care was a stark contrast to the ship's overall atmosphere. Hushed arguments between the kind-eyed man and the captain, a red-faced brute who reeked of cheap liquor, punctuated the air. The tension was palpable, like electricity before a storm. As strength returned to his limbs, Prendick's curiosity grew. He found himself drawn to the mysterious cargo, peering between bars at shapes that defied easy categorization. During one of these explorations, he encountered something. It shuffled out from behind a stack of crates, a nightmarish fusion of man and beast. Its eyes, far too intelligent, met Prendick's gaze. Recognition flashed in those inhuman orbs, followed quickly by fear. Before Prendick could process what he'd seen, the creature melted back into the shadows, leaving him questioning his own sanity. Days blurred together as the Ipecacuanha plowed through endless waves. Prendick's unease grew with each passing hour, fed by snippets of overheard conversations and the increasingly erratic behavior of the crew. Even Montgomery, his steady presence a lifeline in this sea of strangeness, seemed on edge. His eyes constantly darted to the horizon, as if willing their destination to appear. When land finally appeared, a smudge of green against the blue, a palpable shift occurred on board. The captain's belligerence reached new heights, his words slurring as he hurled abuse at Montgomery and the strange cargo alike. Montgomery's patience wore thin, his replies becoming sharper, more desperate. Prendick found himself caught in the middle of this brewing storm. His mind raced with questions. What awaited them on that distant shore? What secrets lay hidden in the hold of this accursed ship? As the island grew larger in his vision, Prendick couldn't shake the feeling that he was sailing towards something that would forever change the course of his life. The Ipecacuanha cut through increasingly choppy waters as they neared the mysterious island. The air grew thick with mist, obscuring the shoreline. An unnatural stillness fell over the ship, broken only by the occasional muffled cry from below decks. Prendick's heart raced as he peered into the swirling fog. For a moment, he thought he saw shapes moving on the beach. Shapes that walked on two legs but moved with an inhuman gait. He blinked, and they were gone. Was his mind playing tricks on him again, or had he glimpsed something not meant for human eyes? The Ipecacuanha approached its enigmatic destination, cutting through the misty waters. The air aboard the ship crackled with an almost palpable tension, as if nature itself sensed the impending chaos. Without warning, the uneasy calm shattered. The ship's captain, reeking of cheap rum and swaying on unsteady feet, launched into a heated argument with Montgomery. Their voices rose and fell like the waves around them, a storm of words that threatened to capsize the fragile peace. Prendick, caught in the crossfire, felt his heart hammer against his ribs. Before he could fully grasp what was happening, rough hands seized him. The world tilted sickeningly as he was shoved off the ship, tumbling into a small boat bobbing precariously on the vast, indifferent ocean. The island loomed before him, a dark silhouette against the blood-red sunset. It seemed to pulse with malevolent energy, promising secrets and dangers beyond his wildest nightmares. Prendick's tiny vessel approached the shore, each wave bringing him closer to the unknown. As the boat neared land, Prendik's eyes locked onto a figure standing on the beach. The man's face was a mask of stern displeasure, his eyes cold and calculating as they bore into Prendik. This, he would soon learn, was the enigmatic Dr. Moreau, master of this forsaken isle. Montgomery's voice carried over the crashing waves, a desperate plea tinged with defiance. "We can't leave him to die, Moreau." Moreau's face twisted, his words sharp enough to cut through the salty air. "Our work requires absolute secrecy.
He cannot stay."
The two men argued like titans clashing, their voices rising and falling in a terrible dance. Prendik, still adrift, felt like a piece of driftwood caught between two opposing currents. He could almost taste the tension bitter and acrid on his tongue. Finally, after what seemed an eternity, Moreau's shoulders sagged in reluctant acquiescence. "Very well," he growled, the words seeming to physically pain him. "But only temporarily. And he's your responsibility, Montgomery." Relief washed over Prendik as his boat finally scraped against the sandy shore. Yet, as he stepped onto the island, an oppressive weight settled on his shoulders. The air itself felt different here, heavy with unspoken secrets and barely contained menace. Each breath felt like drawing in a mixture of dread and curiosity. It was then that Prendik noticed Montgomery's assistant, a hunched figure whose very presence sent alarm bells ringing in his mind. The man's gait was a grotesque ballet, a strange mix of human and something decidedly not. His features were a disconcerting blend that sent icy fingers of fear trailing down Prendik's spine. He averted his gaze, afraid that staring too long might reveal truths he wasn't prepared to face. "This way," Montgomery muttered, his voice low and urgent. He led Prendik towards a compound of sturdy buildings that loomed like ancient sentinels. Their windows were dark and uninviting, seeming to swallow what little light remained as the sun dipped below the horizon. Prendik was ushered into a small, sparse room on the outer edge of the compound. The bare walls seemed to close in around him, the air growing thicker with each passing moment. "You'll stay here," Moreau stated flatly, his tone brooking no argument. His eyes, cold as the depths of the ocean, fixed on Prendik.
"Do not wander. Do not ask questions. Your presence here is
an inconvenience we must tolerate." With those chilling words hanging in the air like a shroud, Moreau and Montgomery left. The door closed with a finality that made Prendik's stomach churn. Alone in the unfamiliar room, he tried to make sense of his situation. His mind raced, recalling glimpses of strange creatures lurking in the shadows, the odd behavior of Montgomery's assistant, and the secretive nature of his reluctant hosts. As night fell, an eerie chorus rose from the depths of the island. Prendik pressed himself against the window, straining to identify the source of the unsettling sounds. They were like nothing he had ever heard before, part animal, part something else entirely. Howls of pain mingled with cries of despair, creating a cacophony that chilled him to his very core. Sleep eluded Prendik that night, his thoughts a whirlwind of questions and fears. As he lay in the darkness, listening to the distant haunting cries, one thing became crystal clear: the true nature of this island and its inhabitants was far more terrifying than anything he could have imagined. And he was trapped here, a reluctant player in a nightmare from which there seemed no escape. As the first light of dawn crept through the window, Prendik made a decision. Despite the explicit warnings to remain within the compound's boundaries, his insatiable curiosity proved too powerful to ignore. With heart pounding and palm sweating, he reached for the door handle, determined to uncover the island's secrets, no matter the cost. Prendik had been explicitly warned to remain within the compound's boundaries. However, his insatiable curiosity proved too powerful to ignore, driving him to venture beyond the safety of the enclosure. The lush, foreboding jungle beckoned to him like a siren's call, impossible to resist despite the potential dangers lurking within its depths. As he stepped into the dense foliage, the world around him transformed. The jungle closed in, a living, breathing entity that seemed to watch his every move with unseen eyes. Shafts of golden sunlight pierced through the thick canopy, creating a mesmerizing dance of light and shadow on the forest floor. The air hung heavy and thick, laden with the intoxicating scent of damp earth and exotic blooms. It filled his lungs, simultaneously invigorating and unsettling him. With each step deeper into the green maze, the sounds of civilization faded away. The familiar noises of the compound were replaced by a wild symphony of nature. Strange bird calls echoed through the trees, their unfamiliar voices sending shivers down Prendik's spine. Suddenly, a loud crash erupted from the nearby underbrush. Something large was moving, unseen but undeniably present. Prendik's heart raced, pounding against his ribcage like a trapped animal. The jungle seemed to pulse around him, alive with secrets and hidden dangers. Sweat beaded on his brow, a mixture of the oppressive heat and growing anxiety. Yet, despite his fear, Prendik pressed on, drawn forward by an almost magnetic pull of curiosity. Without warning, a figure emerged from behind a curtain of vines. Prendik's breath caught in his throat, his body frozen in shock. Before him stood the ape-man, a creature that defied nature itself. Its simian features were undeniable, yet there was an unsettling intelligence in its eyes that spoke of something more.
Something human. You knew.
Here, the ape-man grunted, tilting its head in a disturbingly human-like gesture of curiosity. The broken English tumbling from the creature's lips sent Prendik reeling backward, his mind struggling to comprehend what he was seeing and hearing. Before he could formulate a response, the ape-man loped away, disappearing into the green labyrinth as swiftly as it had appeared. Prendik stood rooted to the spot, his heart thundering in his ears. The encounter left him shaken to his core, yet it only fueled his determination to uncover the island's secrets. With trembling legs, he pressed on, each step taking him further from safety and deeper into the unknown. The air grew thicker, almost suffocating, as Prendik ventured further. The jungle seemed to close in around him, branches reaching out like grasping fingers. It wasn't long before he encountered another of the island's bizarre inhabitants, the Satterman. This new creature was a grotesque blend of human and goat, its lower body covered in coarse hair while its torso remained disturbingly human-like. The Satterman bleated a greeting, its eyes filled with a mixture of fear and longing that made Prendik's skin crawl. He felt a wave of revulsion wash over him, coupled with a morbid fascination he couldn't shake. As his exploration continued, each new encounter left Prendik more disturbed than the last. He observed a being that moved with the slow, deliberate motions of a sloth but possessed the unmistakable features of a man. Its eyes, too human, too aware, followed Prendik's every move. Later, he stumbled upon a creature that seemed to be an unholy union of hyena and swine. Its laughter echoed through the trees, a sound that would haunt Prendik's nightmares for years to come. The creature's eyes gleamed with a twisted intelligence, its mouth twisted in a grotesque approximation of a smile. The sheer unnaturalness of these beings, coupled with their attempts at human behavior, filled Prendik with a growing sense of horror and revulsion. It was as if he had stepped into a twisted fairy tale, where the lines between man and beast had been cruelly blurred. Each encounter left him more shaken, more desperate to understand the madness that had created such abominations. Overwhelmed by the grotesque sights and fearing for his safety, Prendik's exploration turned to flight. He plunged deeper into the jungle, branches whipping at his face as he ran. The lush greenery that had seemed so inviting now felt like a prison, closing in on all sides. Vines seemed to reach out to ensnare him, roots threatened to trip him at every step. As he ran, his mind raced with terrifying theories about the island's secrets. What kind of madness could create such abominations? The name of Dr. Moreau echoed in his thoughts, a sinister whisper that grew louder with each pounding heartbeat. A chilling suspicion began to take root in Prendik's mind, a theory so horrifying he could barely bring himself to contemplate it. Lost and disoriented in the dense foliage, Prendik's panic gave way to a grim determination. He had to uncover the truth, no matter how terrible it might be. He began to piece together a horrifying hypothesis about Dr. Moreau's work, suspecting some form of cruel experimentation that blurred the lines between human and animal. The beauty of the island now seemed like a mask, a cruel deception hiding unspeakable horrors beneath its surface. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees, Prendik realized he was hopelessly lost. The jungle, once a place of wonder, now felt like a trap closing in around him. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm him, Prendik heard a sound that made his blood run cold. It was the unmistakable cry of a creature in pain, a sound that was neither fully human nor entirely animal. The agonized wail echoed through the darkening forest, sending a chill down Prendik's spine. With a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach, he realized the sound was coming from the direction of Dr. Moreau's laboratory. As night fell, Prendik steeled himself for what lay ahead. He knew that in the morning, he would have to confront the doctor and demand answers. Little did he know, Prendik's suspicions about Dr. Moreau's work were about to be violently confirmed. He stumbled upon the doctor's laboratory, his heart pounding with a mix of dread and curiosity. The air hit him like a wall, thick, heavy, and laden with the metallic tang of blood and the sharp bite of antiseptic. It clung to his nostrils, making his stomach churn. As he stepped further into the room, the harsh overhead lights buzzed, casting long shadows that seemed to writhe on the cold stone walls. There, hunched over an operating table, stood Dr. Moreau. His white coat, once pristine, was now a canvas of crimson splatters. In his hands, surgical instruments gleamed wickedly, catching the light as they moved with practiced precision. Prendik's eyes were drawn, almost against his will, to the table. A puma lay there, its chest cavity splayed open like some grotesque flower. Pulsating organs and glistening tissue were exposed to the air, a sight that made Prendik's knees weak. But it was the sound that truly shook him to his core. The puma's screams filled the air, a sound he had heard from a distance before but now experienced in its full, horrifying intensity. Each cry sent shivers down his spine, a primal fear gripping him. It wasn't just the pain of an animal, there was something disturbingly human-like in those agonized wails. Prendik's mind reeled, unable to process the horror unfolding before him. His legs moved of their own accord, propelling him forward into the laboratory. "What in God's name are you doing?" he shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. Dr. Moreau's head snapped up, surprise flashing across his features before settling into a mask of irritation. For a moment, the only sounds were the labored breathing of the puma and the steady drip of blood onto the floor. "This is none of your concern, Mr. Prendik," Moreau said, his voice eerily calm in the face of such brutality. "I suggest you leave immediately." But Prendik stood his ground, his fists clenched at his sides, nails digging into his palms. "No," he said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "I demand to know what's going on here. The ethical implications of your experiments. It's monstrous." The tension in the room was palpable, like electricity crackling in the air. Montgomery, who had been assisting Moreau, looked between the two men, uncertainty etched on his face. Moreau's lips thinned into a tight line. He set down his scalpel with a soft clink that seemed to echo in the charged atmosphere. Straightening up, his imposing figure cast a long shadow across the floor. "Very well," he said, his voice laced with resignation. "If you insist on knowing, I shall explain my work to you." As Moreau began to detail the nature and purpose of his experiments, Prendik felt the foundations of his worldview crumble. Each word from the doctor's mouth was like a hammer blow, shattering his understanding of reality. "You see, Mr. Prendik," Moreau said, gesturing to the puma on the table, "all the strange creatures you have encountered on this island are the results of my work. I am elevating animals to human-like status through surgical and psychological manipulation." Prendik's mind reeled, images of the bizarre inhabitants he had seen flashing before his eyes. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, forming a picture more terrifying than he could have imagined. "But why?" Prendik managed to choke out, his voice barely above a whisper. Moreau's eyes gleamed with a fervent light, like a man possessed. "For the advancement of science, of course. To push the boundaries of what is possible. To create a new form of life that bridges the gap between man and beast." As Moreau continued his explanation, Prendik felt a profound shift within himself. The lines between humanity and animality, once so clear, now blurred before his eyes. The ethical boundaries of scientific pursuit, which he had always believed to be firm and unyielding, suddenly seemed as fragile as spun glass. This revelation marked a pivotal moment in Prendik's understanding of the island and its inhabitants. As he stood there, surrounded by the fruits of Moreau's twisted labor, he knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The world he thought he knew had been irrevocably shattered, leaving him adrift in a sea of moral uncertainty and existential dread. Prendik's head spun, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The room seemed to tilt and sway around him, the puma's cries fading to a distant echo. As darkness crept in at the edges of his vision, he saw Dr. Moreau take a step towards him, a look of grim determination on his face. "I'm afraid, Mr. Prendik," Moreau said, his voice sounding far away, "that now you know the truth, we find ourselves in a rather delicate situation." Prendik's last conscious thought was that Dr. Moreau's hand had been forced by circumstance, and he had no idea what the consequences might be. Dr. Moreau's hand had been forced by circumstance. He finally agreed to reveal the full extent of his work to Prendik. The doctor's face was a mask of reluctance, but his eyes betrayed a glimmer of pride as he led his unwilling guest through the winding corridors of his laboratory. The air grew thick and oppressive as they descended deeper into the bowels of Moreau's domain. Prendik's nostrils flared at the acrid smell of chemicals mingled with something else, something wild and primal that made his skin crawl. Each of Moreau's footsteps echoed off the stone walls, a steady rhythm that seemed to count down to some unspeakable revelation. As they walked, Moreau began to explain his process. His usually cold, clinical voice took on a fervent quality, his eyes gleaming with an almost manic light. "You see, Prendik," he said, gesturing to a row of cages lining the wall, "it's not merely about physical alterations. The true art lies in reshaping the mind." Prendik's gaze darted from cage to cage, his heart pounding in his chest. Each contained a creature more nightmarish than the last, grotesque amalgamations of human and animal features. Some whimpered pitifully, others snarled with barely contained rage. The sight of them made Prendik's stomach churn. Moreau continued, his words tumbling out in an eager rush. "Psychological conditioning is key. We must instill human traits, human thoughts. It's a delicate balance, you understand. Too much humanity, and they rebel. Too little, and they remain mere beasts." As Moreau spoke, Prendik felt a chill creep up his spine. The doctor's passion was palpable, but it was a passion devoid of empathy, of basic human decency. In Moreau's eyes, these living, breathing creatures were nothing more than subjects in a grand experiment. But the pain, Prendick managed to choke out, his voice barely above a whisper.
The suffering.
Moreau waved a dismissive hand, as if swatting away an annoying fly. Pain is merely a physical sensation, my dear Prendick.
It can be overcome, transcended even.
The pursuit of knowledge demands sacrifices. The words hung in the air like a noxious gas, suffocating any protest Prendick might have mustered. He found himself torn between revulsion at Moreau's callousness and a reluctant fascination with the sheer audacity of his vision. As they moved deeper into the laboratory, the air grew thicker, the shadows longer. Moreau's tone shifted, taking on an almost reverent quality. Now, let me tell you about the law, he said, his eyes gleaming. It's the cornerstone of my work, the glue that holds this fragile society together. Prendick listened, his horror mounting, as Moreau outlined the set of rules and rituals he had created to reinforce human behavior in his beast folk. The law, as Moreau called it, was a twisted parody of human morality, designed to suppress the creature's animal instincts and mold them into a grotesque approximation of humanity. No going on all fours, Moreau intoned, his voice taking on a rhythmic quality.
That is the law. Are we not men?
The words seemed to echo through the laboratory, bouncing off the cold stone walls. Prendick could almost hear the beast folk's ragged voices chanting in response. He shuddered, realizing the depth of Moreau's control over his creations. As Moreau continued his explanation, the conversation veered into philosophical territory. The doctor spoke of the nature of humanity, the ethics of creation, and the limits of scientific exploration. His words painted a picture of a world where the boundaries between man and beast, creator and creation, were blurred beyond recognition. Prendick found himself drawn into the discussion, despite his better judgment. The scope of Moreau's ambition was staggering, his vision both terrifying and oddly compelling. For a moment, Prendick could almost see the world through Moreau's eyes, a world where the very essence of life itself could be molded and reshaped at will. But as quickly as it had come, the moment passed. Reality crashed back in, bringing with it the weight of moral responsibility. Prendick looked around the laboratory, truly seeing it for the first time. The cages, the operating tables, the instruments of torture masquerading as scientific equipment, all of it spoke to a fundamental disregard for life, for the sanctity of nature itself. As Moreau's explanation drew to a close, Prendick felt the full weight of his position as an unwilling witness to these horrors. His understanding of the island's bizarre ecosystem had deepened, but so too had his moral conflict. He was trapped, not just physically on this island, but ethically in a nightmare of Moreau's making. The doctor's final words hung in the air, a chilling testament to the depths of his obsession. We stand on the brink of a new era, Prendick. The question is, do you have the courage to step into it with me? Prendick remained silent, the enormity of the question overwhelming him. As he stood there, surrounded by the fruits of Moreau's twisted genius, he realized that his life would never be the same. The line between man and beast, between right and wrong, had been irrevocably blurred, and he was left to navigate this new, terrifying reality alone. Suddenly, a commotion from outside broke the tense silence. Shouts and inhuman cries echoed through the laboratory. Moreau's eyes widened in alarm. "Something's wrong," he muttered, rushing towards the exit. Prendick followed, his heart racing. As they emerged into the blinding sunlight, a scene of chaos unfolded before them. The beast folk were gathered in the clearing, their misshapen forms casting long, grotesque shadows across the ground. And at the center of it all stood a figure Prendick had never seen before, a creature that seemed to embody the very worst of Moreau's experiments. The delicate order of the island lay shattered. A leopard man, one of Moreau's creations, had committed the unthinkable by attacking and devouring a rabbit, violating the most sacred tenet of the law. News of the transgressions spread like wildfire through the beast folk community. Their guttural whispers carried a potent mixture of fear and fascination, echoing through the dense jungle foliage. The very air seemed to thicken with tension, making each breath a labored effort. In his makeshift laboratory, Moreau's face contorted with unbridled rage. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the edge of the wooden table, the veins in his forearms bulging with barely contained fury. The usually composed scientist now resembled one of his own creations, teetering on the edge of losing control. Montgomery, ever the pragmatist, wordlessly began loading his rifle. The metallic clicks of the weapon being prepared sent shivers down Prendick's spine. Each sound was a grim reminder of the violence that was sure to follow. As they set out to hunt the transgressor, the jungle seemed to close in around them. The once vibrant greens now appeared menacing, hiding potential dangers behind every leaf and branch. Shadows danced at the edge of their vision, playing tricks on their senses. The oppressive heat clung to their skin like a second layer, their clothes quickly becoming damp with sweat. Prendick's heart raced as they delved deeper into the dense undergrowth. His nostrils flared, catching the leopard man's scent, a disturbing mixture of musk and something disturbingly human. It hung in the air like a constant reminder of the creature's dual nature, part beast, part man, and the fragility of Moreau's work. As they tracked the creature, signs of its regression became increasingly apparent. Claw marks on trees grew deeper and more savage, bark torn away in long jagged strips. The spacing between prints widened, suggesting the leopard man was reverting to a more quadrupedal gait. It was as if years of Moreau's careful conditioning were unraveling with each passing moment, like a tapestry coming undone thread by thread. The chase felt like a descent into primordial chaos. The jungle's usual symphony of chirps and calls fell silent, replaced by an eerie quiet broken only by their labored breathing and the occasional distant roar, a sound that sent icy tendrils of fear crawling up Prendik's spine. Suddenly, a flash of spotted fur caught Prendik's eye. The leopard man burst from the underbrush, its eyes wild with a mixture of fear and feral hunger. In that moment, Prendik saw the last vestiges of humanity drain from the creature's face, replaced by pure, animalistic instinct. It was like watching a mask slip away, revealing the true nature beneath. The confrontation was swift and brutal. Moreau's voice boomed with authority, invoking the law, but his words fell on deaf ears. The leopard man lunged, all pretense of humanity forgotten. Its muscles rippled beneath its spotted coat, claws extended and ready to tear flesh. Gunshots cracked through the air, shattering the island's false peace. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space of the jungle, leaves trembling in the aftermath. The acrid smell of gunpowder mixed with the metallic scent of blood, creating a nauseating cocktail that made Prendik's stomach churn. As the echo of the final shot faded, Prendik stared at the lifeless form of the leopard man. Its body, neither fully human nor fully animal, seemed a tragic embodiment of Moreau's hubris. Blood seeped into the rich earth, a stark crimson against the lush green of the jungle floor. The sight forced Prendik to confront the true nature of the beast folk and the precarious balance Moreau maintained on the island. The incident etched itself deep into Prendik's memory, each detail burned into his mind with painful clarity. As they made their way back through the now silent jungle, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The death of the leopard man served as a stark reminder of the consequences of disobeying the law, but more importantly, it highlighted the constant threat of regression that loomed over all of Moreau's experiments. Prendik's mind raced with questions and fears. How long before larger-scale chaos engulfed the island? What other horrors lurked in the depths of the jungle, waiting to break free from Moreau's control? As they neared the compound, a bone-chilling roar shattered the uneasy silence. It was a sound unlike anything Prendik had heard before, part animal, part human, and filled with unimaginable agony. The ground seemed to tremble beneath their feet as the roar echoed through the trees. Moreau's face drained of color, his eyes widening in unmistakable fear. "The puma," he whispered, his voice barely audible.
It's escaped.
The delicate balance of the island crumbles in an instant. The puma, its transformation incomplete and agonizing, breaks free from Moreau's laboratory with a bone-chilling roar. The air grows thick with tension as the creature's cry echoes across the compound. Half beast, half human, it tears through the area like a hurricane of fur and fury. Its eyes, wild with pain and terror, reflect the madness of its creation. The beast's powerful paws send equipment crashing to the ground, overturning tables and shattering glass. The cacophony of destruction mingles with the panicked cries of those in its path, creating a symphony of chaos. Dr. Moreau's face contorts into a mask of determination, barely concealing the fear that flickers in his eyes. He snatches his rifle, the cold metal a stark contrast to his sweating palms. His white coat billows behind him like a flag of scientific hubris as he plunges into the dense jungle foliage. The leaves seem to whisper warnings as they close behind him. Prendik and Montgomery exchange a look of dread, their hearts pounding so loudly they can hear the blood rushing in their ears. Without a word, they follow Moreau into the green abyss, their feet carrying them forward even as their minds scream to turn back. The jungle comes alive around them, pulsing with the sounds of the hunt. The puma's roars reverberate through the trees, sending flocks of colorful birds scattering into the sky like living confetti. Moreau's shouts punctuate the air, a mix of commands and curses that seem to bounce off the very leaves. The foliage whips at their faces, leaving stinging welts as they push through, guided only by the sounds of pursuit and their own mounting fear. Suddenly, the cacophony intensifies. They burst into a small clearing, the sudden light momentarily blinding them. As their vision clears, a scene of nightmarish struggle unfolds before them. The puma, cornered and desperate, turns on its creator with savage fury. Moreau's rifle lies useless on the ground, a testament to how quickly the tables have turned. The doctor grapples with the beast, a macabre dance of life and death played out before their horrified eyes. In a blur of claws and blood, it's over. Moreau falls, his life's work literally tearing him apart. The sound of ripping flesh and breaking bones fills the air, a gruesome soundtrack to the doctor's final moments. The puma, wounded and panting, its fur matted with a mixture of its own blood and Moreau's, lopes off into the undergrowth. It leaves behind the broken body of the island's master, a crumpled heap that bears little resemblance to the proud scientist he once was. The jungle falls eerily silent, as if holding its breath in shock. Prendick and Montgomery stand frozen, their minds struggling to process the magnitude of what they've witnessed. The weight of their new reality settles upon them like a suffocating blanket, heavy and oppressive. As they make their way back to the compound, each step feels like wading through molasses. The lush greenery that once seemed full of scientific possibility now looms threateningly, hiding unknown dangers. News of Moreau's demise spreads like wildfire among the beast folk, carried on whispers and growls. Eyes that once held fear and subservience now gleam with a dangerous curiosity, a spark of rebellion igniting in their depths. The carefully constructed society begins to unravel thread by thread. Whispers of rebellion ripple through the colony, growing louder with each passing moment. The House of Pain, once a looming threat, now stands as a crumbling symbol of a fallen order. Its walls seem to groan under the weight of its own significance, a monument to hubris and the folly of playing God. Prendick and Montgomery find themselves adrift in a sea of uncertainty, clinging to the wreckage of their former lives. The task before them seems insurmountable, to maintain control over a population teetering on the edge of chaos. The beast folk, their humanity a fragile veneer, begin to question the very foundations of their existence. Their eyes, once docile, now hold a wild light that sends shivers down Prendick's spine. As night falls on the island, an unsettling quiet descends. The darkness seems to press in from all sides, full of watching eyes and bated breath. But beneath the surface, a current of change surges. The power vacuum left by Moreau's death sets the stage for further chaos and conflict, leaving the fate of the island and its inhabitants hanging by a thread. Prendick lies awake in his makeshift bed, every rustle and snap from the jungle outside making him flinch. His mind races with the possibilities of what the morning might bring. Will the beast folk maintain their tenuous grip on humanity, or will they descend into the savagery that lurks just beneath the surface? As the first hints of dawn begin to lighten the sky, a commotion outside draws Prendick from his restless thoughts. He rushes to find Montgomery, hoping for some semblance of a plan or reassurance. But as he rounds the corner, he's met with a sight that makes his blood run cold. Montgomery stands at the edge of the compound, a bottle in his hand and a wild look in his eyes. The man who was once Moreau's right hand now seems as lost and dangerous as the creatures they sought to control. In the aftermath of Moreau's demise, Montgomery found himself adrift in a sea of despair. The loss of his mentor and the collapse of their life's work proved too much for him to bear. The island, once a vibrant hub of scientific discovery, now felt like a suffocating prison. The salty breeze that had once invigorated Montgomery now seemed to whisper taunts, reminding him of all he had lost. Days and nights blurred together as he stumbled through the compound, a bottle perpetually clutched in his trembling hand. Prendick watched his companions descent with a mixture of pity and growing alarm. Montgomery's eyes, once sharp and inquisitive, had dulled to a glassy, unfocused stare. His hands, formerly steady enough to perform the most delicate of surgeries, now shook uncontrollably. One night, as a bloated moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the island, Montgomery's drunken stupor reached a dangerous crescendo. In his clumsy attempt to light a lamp, he sent it crashing to the floor. The flame caught the dry wood instantly, and within moments, the fire spread with terrifying speed. The acrid smell of smoke filled the air as Prendick's shouts of alarm pierced the night. But Montgomery seemed oblivious to the chaos unfolding around him. The fire devoured everything in its path, their remaining supplies, precious medical equipment, and the shelter that had been their last connection to civilization. As dawn broke, the full extent of the devastation became clear. The compound, once a testament to human ingenuity, now stood as a blackened skeleton against the lush island backdrop. Montgomery, his face smeared with soot and his eyes wild, stumbled away from the ruins. Prendick called after him, his voice hoarse from the smoke and desperation.
Montgomery, come back.
We need to stick together. But his words fell on deaf ears. Montgomery lurched towards the dense jungle where the beast folk dwelled, as if drawn by some unseen force. Heart pounding, Prendick followed at a distance. The jungle seemed to close in around them, the air thick with humidity and the calls of strange creatures. They emerged into a clearing where a group of the more aggressive beast folk had gathered. The tension in the air was palpable, like the calm before a storm. "My children," Montgomery slurred, arms outstretched. "Don't you recognize your father?" A low growl rippled through the group, sending chills down Prendick's spine. He tried to call out a warning, but his voice caught in his throat. In a blur of fur and flashing claws, the beast folk descended upon Montgomery. Prendick rushed forward, waving his arms and shouting desperately, trying to distract the creatures. But his efforts were futile. The attack was swift and merciless, a frenzy of primal violence that seemed to last both an eternity and mere seconds. As quickly as it had begun, it was over. The beast folk melted back into the jungle, leaving behind a scene of horror. Montgomery lay motionless on the blood-soaked ground, his life extinguished by the very beings he had helped create. Prendick stood frozen, the reality of his situation crashing down upon him like a tidal wave. The metallic scent of blood mingled with the earthy smell of the jungle, creating a nauseating cocktail. His legs trembled, threatening to give way beneath him. He was now the sole human survivor on an island teeming with increasingly feral creations. The last vestige of the old order had vanished with Montgomery's death, leaving Prendick to face an uncertain future amidst the crumbling remnants of their imposed civilization. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the clearing, Prendick heard a rustling in the undergrowth behind him. He whirled around, his heart pounding in his chest. A pair of glowing eyes stared back at him from the darkness, and a low guttural growl filled the air. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He was no longer the hunter, but the hunted. Prendick stood alone on the island, the last human survivor in a world gone mad. With Dr. Moreau and Montgomery dead, he faced the daunting task of survival amidst the increasingly unstable beast folk. The weight of his solitude pressed down on him like a physical force as he surveyed the wild, untamed landscape that had become his prison. Lush greenery that once seemed vibrant now loomed ominously, hiding potential threats in every shadow. The salty sea breeze, once a promise of freedom, now carried only the bitter reminder of his isolation. Prendick's mind raced, grasping for a plan. His life hung by a thread, balanced precariously on the beast folk's lingering fear of humans and their ingrained obedience to the law. With trembling hands, he gathered what courage he could muster and decided to use this to his advantage. In the days that followed, Prendick adopted a facade of authority. His voice rang out with a confidence he didn't feel as he recited the law to groups of beast folk. "Are we not men?" he would call, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. Their reluctant, guttural responses sent shivers down his spine, each interaction a dance on a knife's edge.
Nights were the worst.
As darkness fell, strange cries echoed through the air, a cacophony of beast and man intertwined. Prendick huddled in his makeshift shelter, clutching a crudely fashioned spear. Every rustle in the undergrowth sent his imagination into overdrive, conjuring images of monstrous creatures lurking just beyond his sight. Sleep, when it came, was fitful and plagued by nightmares of claws and fangs tearing at his flesh. Days bled into weeks, and Prendick watched with growing horror as the beast folk began to change. It started subtly, a word mispronounced here, a more pronounced slouch there. But soon, the regression became undeniable. The leopard man, once articulate, now communicated in snarls and growls. The hyena swine's laughter grew more maniacal, its eyes gleaming with a feral hunger that made Prendick's blood run cold. One afternoon, while foraging for food, Prendick stumbled upon a brutal fight between two groups of beast folk. Hidden behind a large fern, he watched in horror as they tore at each other with tooth and claw, their bestial nature fully unleashed. The sight of blood and violence turned his stomach, but he couldn't look away. This was the new order of things, the crumbling of Moreau's carefully constructed society. As he crept away from the scene, a twig snapped under his foot. In an instant, several pairs of wild eyes turned in his direction. Prendick's heart leapt to his throat as he broke into a run, crashing through the underbrush. Behind him, he could hear the pounding of feet and the excited yelps of the chase. It was only by diving into a hidden crevice that he managed to escape, lying there for hours, barely daring to breathe. The constant state of alertness began to take its toll on Prendick. He found himself jumping at shadows, talking to himself, questioning his own humanity. The line between man and beast blurred in his mind. Sometimes, he caught himself walking on all fours or sniffing the air like an animal. These moments filled him with a deep, existential dread. His days became a monotonous cycle of survival tasks. Foraging for food in the decaying ruins of the compound, he felt like a scavenger himself. Every meal was a small victory, every sip of clean water a blessing. He fashioned crude weapons from whatever he could find: sharpened sticks, jagged pieces of metal, each one a tenuous lifeline in this hostile world. As the sun set on another day of this precarious existence, Prendick sat at the entrance of his shelter, eyes scanning the darkening landscape. His body was tense, ears straining for any sound of approach. In the distance, a howl rose up, followed by another and another. The night was alive with the calls of creatures that were neither fully beast nor man. Prendick gripped his spear tighter, knowing that sleep would once again be elusive, his mind trapped in a constant state of hypervigilance. As he stared out into the darkness, a flicker of movement caught his eye. Something was out there, something different. His heart raced as he squinted, trying to make out the shape in the moonlight.
Could it be?
His breath caught in his throat as he realized what he was seeing, the unmistakable outline of a small boat, gently bobbing in the waves near the shore. After months of isolation and constant danger on the island, Prendik's opportunity for escape finally arrived. He discovered a small boat that had drifted to the island's shore, likely from a passing ship. His heart thundered in his chest as he approached the battered vessel, each step sinking into the damp sand. Hope, a feeling he'd almost forgotten, bloomed in his chest like a fragile flower pushing through cracks in parched earth.
The boat lay before him, a pitiful sight.
Its hull was cracked and weathered, bearing the scars of its battle with the relentless sea. To any other eye, it might have seemed beyond salvation. But to Prendik, it was a lifeline, a chance to break free from the nightmarish world of Dr. Moreau's creations. With trembling hands, he ran his fingers along the rough wood, his mind already racing with plans for repair. Days melted into nights as Prendik worked tirelessly on the boat. The jungle loomed around him, a living, breathing entity that seemed to watch his every move. He scavenged materials from the ruins of Moreau's compound, each trip a dangerous gamble. The beast folk, now more animal than human, roamed the island with increasing ferocity. Their howls echoed through the dense foliage, sending icy fingers of fear down Prendik's spine as he hurried back to his hidden workspace. Every snapping twig, every rustle of leaves set his nerves on edge. The constant state of alertness left him exhausted, but he couldn't afford to rest. He worked with feverish intensity, driven by the fear of discovery and the desperate need for freedom. The boat became his obsession, his only link to the world beyond this island of horrors. The air was thick with the scent of rotting vegetation and salt spray. Sweat poured down Prendik's face as he labored, the tropical heat oppressive and unrelenting. His hands, once soft from a life of academic pursuits, were now calloused and bleeding from the constant work. But he barely noticed the pain, so focused was he on his task. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of furtive labor, the boat was ready. Prendik gathered what meager supplies he could, a few coconuts, their rough husks a reminder of his time on the island, some dried fish that smelled of smoke and desperation, and a makeshift container of fresh water that sloshed with each movement. With a deep breath that filled his lungs with the heavy, humid air, he pushed the boat into the surf. The gentle lapping of waves against the hull sounded like a siren's call to freedom. As the island receded behind him, Prendik felt a dizzying mix of elation and terror. The vast, empty ocean stretched out before him like a blank canvas, full of both promise and peril. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the sea into a shimmering mirror that hurt his eyes to look at directly. The gentle rocking of the boat, at first a comfort, soon became a torment as the days wore on. Time lost all meaning as Prendik drifted. He rationed his supplies carefully, but dehydration soon set in, leaving his lips cracked and his throat as dry as sandpaper. The once soothing sound of water against wood became a constant, maddening rhythm that echoed in his mind. Hallucinations began to plague him, born of exhaustion and the relentless sun. The faces of Moreau's creatures swam before his eyes, their animal features twisted in grotesque grins. He saw Montgomery, his face bloated and blue, reaching up from the depths with webbed fingers to drag him down. In his more lucid moments, Prendik wondered if he had traded one form of madness for another, if perhaps the island had been real and this endless sea the true delusion. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm him, a dark shape appeared on the horizon. Prendik blinked, certain it was another mirage. But the shape grew larger, solidifying into the unmistakable silhouette of a ship. With trembling hands, he fumbled for the makeshift flag he had prepared, waving it weakly above his head. His parched throat could barely manage a whisper, let alone a shout for help. Time seemed to stand still as Prendik waited, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. Would they see him? Or would they pass by, leaving him to die alone in this vast, uncaring sea? Just as his arm began to falter, he saw movement on the deck of the approaching vessel. They had spotted him. As the ship drew alongside his tiny craft, Prendik felt a wave of relief so intense it nearly overwhelmed him. Rough hands reached down, pulling him aboard. The sudden shift from his small boat to the larger vessel sent his head spinning. He collapsed on the deck, too weak to stand, his mind reeling from the sudden shift in fortune. Through the haze of exhaustion and delirium, Prendik realized that his nightmarish ordeal on the island of Dr. Moreau had come to an end. But as the concerned faces of the crew swam in and out of focus, a new fear began to take root in his heart. How would he explain what had happened to him? Would anyone believe the horrors he had witnessed? As consciousness slipped away, Prendik's last thought was of home. England. A place that now seemed as foreign and distant as the stars themselves. Little did he know that his return would mark not just the end of his island ordeal, but the beginning of a profound transformation that would reshape his entire existence. Prendik's return to England marked the end of his island ordeal. It also heralded the beginning of a profound transformation that would reshape his entire existence. The familiar streets of London, once a comforting embrace, now felt alien and threatening. Prendik's footsteps echoed hollowly on the cobblestones as he navigated through the bustling crowds. Every face he encountered seemed to harbor a hidden beast, lurking just beneath the surface of civility. His eyes darted from person to person, searching for signs of the monstrous. A woman's laugh revealed sharp canines, instantly transporting him back to the leopard man's snarl. A gentleman's hunched posture as he hurried past evoked memories of the ape-like creatures that still haunted Prendik's dreams. Even the most innocuous gestures took on sinister undertones. A hand running through hair became a claw ready to strike. Fingers drumming on a table transformed into the restless pacing of a caged animal. The line between man and beast, once so clear, had blurred beyond recognition. Social gatherings, once a source of pleasure, became nightmarish ordeals. Prendik would find himself pressed into a corner, his back against the wall, heart racing as he scanned the room for threats. The chatter of polite conversation morphed into a cacophony of growls and howls in his mind. Every friendly touch felt like an impending attack. "Are you quite all right, old chap?" a concerned acquaintance asked one evening, noticing Prendik's pallor and trembling hands. Prendik's throat constricted, words failing him. How could he possibly explain the horrors he had witnessed? The memories of Moreau's grotesque creations flashed before his eyes, vivid and terrifying. He forced a smile, but it felt more like a grimace, his facial muscles struggling to remember the simple act of appearing normal. As days turned to weeks, Prendik's paranoia grew like a malignant tumor, consuming his thoughts and poisoning his interactions. The bustling streets of London, once a symbol of civilization, now felt like a jungle teeming with predators. He began to avoid crowded areas, his pulse quickening at the mere thought of being surrounded by potential monsters in human skin. Sleep became an elusive luxury. When exhaustion finally claimed him, his dreams were a chaotic swirl of bestial faces and inhuman cries. He would wake drenched in sweat, the sheets tangled around him like vines in a primordial forest. In his desperation for solace, Prendik turned to the cold comfort of science. He set up a small laboratory in his home, finding a measure of peace in the predictability of chemical reactions and the immutable laws of physics. The gentle bubbling of solutions and the precise measurements of compounds became a soothing ritual, a stark contrast to the unpredictable nature of human interaction. But it was in astronomy that Prendik found his true escape. He invested in a powerful telescope, spending countless nights on his balcony, gazing at the vast expanse of the cosmos. The infinite darkness, punctuated by pinpricks of starlight, offered a perspective that dwarfed his earthly concerns. As he charted the movements of planets and identified constellations, Prendik felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The vastness of space made the island and its horrors seem insignificant. In the grand tapestry of the universe, what were Moreau's creations but a tiny, fleeting aberration? Gradually, Prendik withdrew from society altogether. He declined invitations, ignored letters, and rarely ventured beyond the confines of his home. His days were spent poring over scientific texts and conducting experiments, while his nights were dedicated to the stars. Though loneliness sometimes gnawed at him like a hungry beast, Prendik found a measure of peace in his self-imposed isolation. The company of books and the silent companionship of the night sky became preferable to the anxiety-inducing presence of his fellow humans. As years passed, Prendik's fears never fully subsided, but they became more manageable. He learned to find comfort in the vastness of the universe, gazing at the stars and contemplating the insignificance of earthly concerns in the grand scheme of things. The telescope became his window to a world untouched by the horrors he had witnessed, a realm where the laws of nature remained pure and uncorrupted. In the quiet solitude of his nightly stargazing, Prendik finally found a semblance of tranquility. The gentle whir of the telescope as he adjusted its focus became a lullaby, drowning out the echoes of bestial cries that still lingered in his memory. The cool night air on his face washed away the phantom sensations of tropical heat and the acrid smell of Moreau's laboratory. As he peered into the depths of space, Prendik felt a connection to something greater than himself, something untainted by the primal chaos that had once threatened to consume him. The stars, in their silent eternal dance, offered a promise of order and constancy that he had thought lost forever. And so, Edward Prendik found his place in the world, not among the bustling crowds of London, but in the quiet contemplation of the cosmos. The island and its monstrous inhabitants became distant memories, fading like stars at dawn. In the end, it was the vastness of the universe that provided the sanctuary he had so desperately sought, a final escape from the beast that lurks within the heart of man.